Hey guys, Andrew's here with Atom Audio, and today we're going to be talking about some overlooked factors when it comes to studio design. So today we are with Steve Durr, who's a Nashville-based studio designer. So we as a studio monitor manufacturer are always kind of pushing the idea that people should invest just as much time and energy into studio design, acoustic treatment, and everything like that as they do in their monitors. Right. So what is your process when a client hits you up for the first time, and what do you look at to kind of start the process of designing the studio?
Really and truly, we want to meet with them, find out how they work, find out what their expectations are, find out what they think feels good, because everything in audio is an emotional experience. And then we have clients that we don't accept the project with because they're either a vanity studio or we can't communicate with them on that level. I've actually turned down some really big projects simply because there was no connection there. There was no understanding. I grew up making records, and people are hiring designers all the time, and the first question you want to ask a designer is, well, how many records have you made? Oh, I'm an architect, I've never made a record. Well, that's great, but you really have to have an understanding of what it's like to sit in this room and take something and convert that into something that moves people emotionally.
And what are some of the projects of recent years that you're the most proud of that you've worked on?
Actually, all of them, every damn one of them. And that's because we only take things on that we think we can make spectacular. Gotcha. We just redid Jack's Tracks, which is a really famous studio on Music Row for Garth, and it turned out really, really well. And we really try to take the old stuff and mix it with the new stuff and put something in that makes sense from an acoustical standpoint, but mostly from an emotional standpoint.
Well, you've been in this industry for quite a while doing a lot of studio design. I mean, you've done designs for stadiums and stuff like that too. But today's video is going to be kind of talking about some of the things that are typically overlooked in studios. So what is one of the first things that comes to mind when you walk into a studio that might be already done that you think, oh, that could have been done better, or they could have done this to,
I'm not much into that. What's really important in a recording studio is vibe. The vibe is everything. We build all of our rooms in a sense that you don't want to leave. You want to stay there. Like this room is very comfortable. If you turn that silly light off, it's really, really comfortable to hang out here and listen to music. And quite frankly, my neighbors come over and I can't get them to go home. Because it's just an emotional experience. It's a place that you don't want to leave. And so if you look at the stuff that we've designed, it all has that feeling to it, that all has that comfort level to it. We designed a studio for Mark Ronson in London, and it's amazing how many people have walked in that studio and have called up, we want a studio, but we don't want it to look like a diner. We don't want it to look like a dentist office. We want that kind of vibe. And it's been a fascinating experience because that's all I grew up with. In the beginning, there was nothing but vibe. I mean, if you go to famed studios in Muscle Shoals, where all those great records are made, they have a console and an LA2A and an EMT plate. And those records are still hold up on everything in the world. There's no technology at all.
What is the second thing that you think is overlooked in studio design for the most part?
Air conditioning.
Air conditioning.
Yeah, air conditioning. Everybody knows it needs to be quiet. We got that. That's pretty straightforward. But what happens with air conditioning is the convection of that air, like how the air is introduced into that room, is very critical. So if you've got a vent right over the loudspeakers, the way that sound travels is compression and refraction of air molecules. So every time the air conditioner turns on, the cold air drops out, it changes the wave of the sound. And the radical experience of that was I did the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and the speakers were in the pit area shooting back up in the stands. When we first turned it on, it was unbelievable. You couldn't hear anything. But if you got up on the roof, it was loud as hell. And what was happening was the black racetrack in the heat was bending those waves up on the thing. So we aimed the speakers into the racetrack and you could hear it fine. Wow. And so the same thing happens, just not on that magnitude. The other thing that happens is that the air conditioner, if it's too big, will literally change the temperature 1 degree an hour. And so what happens from there is everything acoustically is out of tune. So we undersize the air conditioner. That's an argument we have with every air conditioner person we deal with, because they're looking at their train book going, well, you've got, how many people? Well, we may have a choir in here of 40 people. Well, they designed to that number, the worst case scenario, which is understandable. But you have to literally explain to every mechanical person that we deal with that is the main issue, that the systems are over-designed, they're too big, and so they come on, they chill the room off, and then they shut off. But what happens is that air blow on an acoustic guitar, blow on a set of drums, blow on an acoustic piano, absolutely throws it out of tune immediately. The trick is make the air conditioner half the size that mechanical people tell you it has to be, and it'll come on. The fan will run a long time. Every once in a while, the compressor will kick on, take the humidity out of the air, and keep the temperature at a 1 degree an hour temperature.
If someone has a studio already and they're kind of trying to figure out what to do with the air vents and things like that, what would you suggest for them to do to make it quieter? Because that was the first thing you brought up, was that it obviously has to be quiet. So what are some ways that people can make it quiet?
Well, two things about that is, one is that springs are the only thing that isolates low frequency energy. So let's just say the unit's sitting in some place and it's rumbling. If there's 4 corners to this unit, one corner is going to have a lot more weight on it than the other one, because one corner is going to have a motor in it and the other one's going to have nothing. So when I say properly engineered springs, you can go to Kinetics or Mason Industries. They will engineer the springs for you for free if you tell them what units you're working with. The next thing that happens is how much air you're actually blowing through the ductwork in there. But most of the time, that's not a problem. The problem is the grills that people choose. If you look at a book from any one of the manufacturers, you'll see a published NC number. And what that is noise criteria. And it will tell you exactly how much CFMs you're putting through there and how much noise it generates. The air conditioner and the grills really need to be coordinated as one piece. If you've got 400 CFMs going through a vent, you're trying to blow it across a room, it's a whistle. Yeah. And it's going to make noise. So a lot of times we just take the grills off and all of a sudden it's 10 times quieter. If you've got a damper at the grill, same problem. The damper has basically become a whistle. You don't need to design much lower than NC30 in a control room, which is a very cost-saving experience, because there's fans, there's all kinds of things that go on here. You're going to play that fairly loud, reasonably loud. 83 dB is where the ear is the most linear, so that's where we work when we're starting to do things from an acoustical standpoint. The studio is a whole other story, because you got a microphone in there that's got no ability to distinguish between noise and somebody singing. So that room is really quiet. This room, not necessarily. You don't spend a ridiculous amount of money to make the control room quiet. But you open up a live microphone there, it's not discriminatory. It just sends whatever's back. So those are 2 ways you could save a lot of energy and time and grief and money by looking at it from that standpoint.
So we've talked about vibe being the most important.
Number 1.
Air conditioning being the second most overlooked thing. And so what is third in your opinion?
The other thing we spend a lot of time with is ergonomics. I went to work on a project with Disney for a long time. And so they did a survey to find out all the top producers in the world, they interviewed like 30 of them. What's the most important aspect of any studio you work in? And of course, me, it's going to be acoustics, of course. Did he make the list of top 10? The number 1 was parking and security. There's just all those sort of things that I think are overlooked. There are things that really don't have much to do with the technical aspect of it. When we look at somebody's studio, we look at it all the way down to the chairs. What's going to make this the most comfortable, pleasant experience for anybody? How do we make money? We make money in a studio by people enjoying being there. You need to build someplace that welcomes people.
That's 3.
All right.
So is 4th the one that he mentioned where it's flat? It's not necessarily perfect,
yeah.
Or did you want to go over something else?
That's a really good, that's a really good point. None of us hear things exactly the same. When I'm working in somebody's studio, I tell them, the first thing you gotta do is mix something. Don't assume anything about it. Don't assume the low end's right. Don't assume the high end's right. Just mix it till it sounds great. Then we know what's wrong, or what we need adjustment. Those adjustments are very slight, always. But at the same time, we have a reference point. We look at things all the time that are perfectly flat, and it's just not very fun to listen to. First of all, the ear's not flat. And so some changes and some shifts in things will actually dial a room in differently. I know the ear is the most linear at 83. And so we work in 83 to 85 to 87 when we're working in balance and set speakers. The other thing that happens with that is linearity. And one of the things I like about your speakers is they're linear. They sound the same at 2 as they do at 4 as they does at 6. That switch in there, and that's a function of speaker components and amplifiers.
Cool. So I guess we're to number 5. Do you have an idea of what number 5 might be?
Yeah, it's players and engineers. A mediocre drummer sounds mediocre. I don't care what studio you put it in. You can take a guitar from Sears and give it to Eric Clapton, and there won't be a soul in this room that's not teared up, and it just makes all the difference in the world. And then the next question is, well, how do you find players? you don't find them, they find you. So if you go watch somebody and play, you'll figure out real quick that, there's probably 5 people on the stage that are really good. There's one son of a bitch that's carrying the whole band. It may be the bass player, it may be the drummer, it may be somebody else, but somebody in that band is carrying that whole band.
I think the times are pretty weird right now. And so a lot of our users are probably working from home and developing studios in their own space. What would you say that they're walking into basically an extra bedroom probably more than anything else?
Sure, I get those calls every day.
Yeah. What do you think is the first step when people walk into a bedroom that they want to turn into a studio?
Well, it depends. If they own the home, then the first thing I would do is literally brace the walls up. Just put like a layer of soundboard and another layer of 5/8 sheetrock on them. Get those walls so they got some rigidity, because that's the only way you're gonna get the low end to work. I don't care what else you do. A couple of points on near-field monitors. If you put them on stands and you can push the stand and the whole speaker moves and the stand moves, it's piston physics. And so what you're trying to do is compress the air molecules in the room. Well, if it can move the stand easier than it can compress the air molecules in the room, there goes the low end, because it's doing that kind of thing. So that would be the first thing that we would look at. Obviously, if you can brace up the walls and the ceiling, bless you. The air conditioning, take the grills off. It's really how you get that quiet, But the near fields, I see so many mistakes in near field. They're very critical about how they're aimed. The focal point for us is 2 feet behind where you sit. It's not here. And that's because if you aim them on top of each other, you get a build up in the middle. If you sit here, you can move across this console, and it's exactly the same level all the way across. And that's because the focal point's back here, not right here. They see that mistake all the time. And then the other thing, you'll sit here, and one of them will be over here, and the other one will be over there. Because these things and all near fields cross over higher up, that what happens is it starts to get more and more beamier and more directional. So yeah, we go on an equilateral triangle, but we make sure those 2 speakers are exactly the same distance from this. We put a microphone stand here, and we make sure those speakers are exactly the same distance from that microphone stand to the speaker, and the same thing over there, and that they're aimed exactly the same, framing square, some symbol like that. Those 2 things are the most critical part of near fields. The other thing is we set them on little rubber feet that come from Home Depot, because you put them on the pads that are sold by everybody. What happens with those is that at some point that pad just transfers right on through. So you want to put them on something that's not over the whole base of the speaker. So we use these little $1.99 feet from Home Depot or Lowe's, and we put one on each corner, and now it's not actually coupled to it. So what you're trying to do is get the room, the place where the speakers are mounted, all those things to sit in a place that doesn't have a resonance in a frequency you're interested in. If it resonates at 20, who cares? All the math that was devised for acoustics in a room was based on large acoustics, large rooms, arenas, concert halls, that sort of thing. There's no real math that assigns itself well to a small environment, because there's no predictability to what it's doing. So to tell somebody that you've got to be some dimension or some distance is a great place to start, I'm sure. But when we design rooms for people and they say, well, we're going to put the drums right here. So, well, you may start there, but there's some magical spot in that room where the drums are going to sound different than they do anywhere else. And you've got to find those spots. Acoustics is not an exact science. It's an art form.
We always talk about ways to become a producer, ways to become an engineer, and tips for those career paths. But what's a tip that you would give for someone that might want to be a studio designer in the future?
So what I would say to someone is, go find a way to read a book. There's a guy named F. Alton Everest. Read his books. They're common sense in acoustics. You're not building the ER. Nobody's going to die, So try to use your mind in a way that's the perspective of, I'm an engineer, I'm a producer, I'm going to want to work in this studio, I want to live in this studio, I want it to be someplace I can't wait to go to. I can't wait to walk out that door and come in this room. Matt comes to work at 7:30 just because he loves being in this environment, You have to create. I'm doing a studio for a guy that owned a funeral home, and I swear to God, it looked like a funeral home when we got through. That made him comfortable. you know? I mean, it's where he felt, he had big, heavy purple drapes and, glitter on the ceiling and all that stuff, but that's where he was comfortable, That's what his environment was. So don't get locked into a whole lot of technical stuff that really doesn't affect the end product, I mean, you got to look at the older studios. I don't care whether you want to or not, but they were designed in a way that people wanted to go there and play. They felt good playing there. When we work in live sound, and we do I used to do a lot of live PA, my first priority was go make sure those musicians could hear, that they were comfortable on stage. If they needed a water, they needed a joint, they needed whatever they needed, I got whatever they needed. Because if they're not comfortable, it doesn't matter what PA you got, it's not going to sound good. And it's the same way with orchestras. When we go and listen to some orchestra somewhere, and we've been put in a position of where we want you to help us fix this, I go talk to the players. Well, we can't hear shit. Well, I don't care what we do at the room acoustics, they don't matter. If the players can't hear and they're not comfortable, it doesn't matter. That's the first lesson you got to learn about everything. So if you build a studio, the thing you want to talk to is not the bum that owns it. You want to talk to the people that work there.
Well, thank you, Steve Durr, for doing this video with us.
It's always a pleasure.
We hope you guys enjoyed it and learned something from it. If you guys liked the video, please subscribe, and you can find out more about Steve's business in the description below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.